They never told us what we would become. That was the first lie, though I did not recognize it as such at the time. I was 17 when the Officio Assassinorum rejected my application. Too tall, they said, too broad in the shoulder. My reflexes a fraction too slow for the Calidus Temple. I wept that night in my cell at the Schola Progenium, convinced my life had ended before it began. How naive I was, how mercifully ignorant. The recruiter came 3 days later. He wore robes the color of old iron, and his face was a mask of prayer seals and augmetic enhancements. He told me I had been selected for a sacred duty, one that required strength of body and absolute purity of soul. He told me I would serve the Emperor in ways that few could comprehend. He told me I would guard the most dangerous secrets in the Imperium. What he did not tell me was that I would do so alone, in darkness, for decades without end. What he did not tell me was that the secrets would guard me back, that they would seep into my bones like radiation, that I would become less human with every passing year, until I could no longer remember what it felt like to be warm. I have been a Shadowkeeper for 43 years. I do not know if I am still a man. The facility has no name. It exists on no map, registered in no archive except those sealed beneath 7 layers of clearance and guarded by more than locks. I learned its location once, in my first week, before they performed the first surgery. It was a mistake on the part of my handler, a momentary lapse in protocol. He showed me a star chart to explain the supply rotation schedule. I saw the coordinates. I memorized them instantly, as all Schola graduates are trained to do. When he realized his error, I watched the blood drain from his face. 3 days later, I woke from the first of many procedures. They had taken my memory of those coordinates, carved them out with scalpels and neural scrubs, but they had taken other things too. The face of my mother, the taste of real fruit, the sound of rain on stone. Collateral damage, they explained. Acceptable losses in service to the throne. I stopped counting what they took from me after the 5th surgery. The chamber I guard is 300 meters beneath the surface, carved from bedrock and reinforced with adamantium plating ½ a meter thick. The entrance is a vault door that requires 3 separate keys, 2 biometric scans, and a prayer of opening that takes 17 minutes to recite correctly. I perform this ritual once every 3 months, when the supply servitors arrive, guided by handlers in hazmat suits, who will not meet my eyes. They leave the supplies in the antechamber: nutrient paste, water reclamation filters, fresh robes, ammunition for the bolt pistol I have never fired, and then they seal me in again. The entire exchange takes less than an hour. In the early years, I would try to speak to them, to ask about the world above, to request books or music or any connection to humanity beyond these walls. They never responded. After the first decade, I stopped trying. The door closes with a sound like a tomb sealing. I have heard it 172 times. Inside the chamber, the temperature never varies from 12 degrees. The air is recycled through filters that remove everything: moisture, warmth, even scent. I breathe sterile nothing, in and out, as regular as the heartbeat of the machines that sustain this place. The walls are bare adamantium, smooth and cold, marked only by the aquila etched above the inner door, and the purity seals I renew each week. There is a sleeping alcove barely large enough for my body. There is a prayer station with an icon of the Emperor, its features worn smooth by my fingers over decades of devotion. There is a waste reclamation unit. There is a weapons locker containing the bolt pistol, 3 magazines, and a combat knife. There is a shelf with my permitted possessions, 4 books of Imperial prayers, a data slate with pre-approved texts on duty and sacrifice, a Vox unit that receives only 1 channel, and a chronometer that counts the seconds of my vigil. And there is the vault. The vault sits in the center of the chamber like a tumor, a black cube 2 meters on each side, covered in wards and seals I was never taught to read. I do not know what is inside. I am not permitted to know. My duty is singular and absolute, to ensure that nothing enters and nothing leaves. I have been given no context, no explanation, no justification beyond the Emperor's will and the Imperium's need. In my first years, I would spend hours staring at the vault, imagining what could be so dangerous that it required a human guardian rather than automated systems, Xenos artifacts, forbidden texts, warp-tainted relics, the ossified remains of a traitor whose name had been burned from history. I entertained 1,000 theories, each more elaborate than the last, and none brought me closer to truth. Now I try not to look at it. Looking invites questions. Questions invite doubt. Doubt is the first step toward damnation. But sometimes, in the deep hours when my chronometer marks the time between midnight and dawn, concepts that have no meaning here, where there is no sun, no sky, only the unchanging fluorescent panels that bathe everything in pale yellow light, I hear sounds from inside the vault. They are subtle, so subtle I could convince myself they are imaginations born of isolation, a whisper of movement, a breath against metal. Once, I thought I heard something that might have been a voice, but so distant and distorted that it could have been the groan of the facility's superstructure settling. I have never reported these sounds. To report them would be to admit I listen. To admit I listen would be to acknowledge that part of me wants to know. Curiosity is a sin when directed at holy mysteries. So I have been taught. So I believe. So I must believe. Because belief is all that remains. They modified me extensively before posting me here. The surgeries were necessary, they explained, to prepare me for the unique conditions of my assignment. They enhanced my musculature to prevent atrophy in the confined space. They altered my metabolism so I could survive on minimal rations. They installed augmetic lenses that allow me to see in the dark, though the lights never fail. They implanted a neural governor that suppresses certain emotional responses specifically: fear, loneliness, and despair. I can still feel them, theoretically, but they arrive muted and distant, like sensations experienced through thick fabric. It is a mercy, I suppose. Without these modifications, I would have gone mad in the first year. Sometimes I wonder if madness would have been preferable. At least, madness is still human. The first decade passed in a haze of routine. I developed a schedule to impose structure on the timeless void. Upon waking, I would perform 2 hours of physical training in the small space available: push-ups, squats, shadowboxing against the adamantium walls until my knuckles bled. Then I would clean my body with the minimal water ration. Then prayers, the litany of protection, the canticle of vigilance, the prayer of the unwavering sentinel. These would take 3 hours if recited properly, each word enunciated with the precision demanded by the ministorum. Then I would eat 1 meal of nutrient paste, grey and tasteless, providing exactly the calories required and nothing more. Then I would read from the approved texts, the same 4 books I had memorized within the first 5 years but which I continued to study, searching for new interpretations, hidden meanings, anything to occupy the grinding machinery of thought. Then I would stand watch. 6 hours of perfect stillness before the vault, bolt pistol in hand, eyes on the sealed door, mind focused on prayer and duty. This was the heart of my purpose, the reason for my existence. I was the Shadowkeeper. I was the last line of defense against whatever lurked inside that black cube. If the seals failed, if something tried to emerge, I would end it. That was my oath. That was my purpose. That was the prayer I whispered to myself 10,000 times in those first years. I am the Shadowkeeper. Nothing passes. Nothing escapes. After the watch, I would eat again. Then more prayers. Then maintenance, checking the weapons, cleaning the chamber, replacing prayer seals. Then mandated exercise again, lighter this time, stretching to prevent muscle degradation. Then a final prayer before sleep. Then sleep, or what passes for it. 4 hours in the cold alcove with the lights dimmed to 30%. Never truly dark. Never truly rest. Just a shallow unconsciousness, where dreams were forbidden by the neural governor that dulled everything that might make me human. This was my life. This is my life. The routine has not changed in 43 years. Except it has. Small things, at first. So small I dismissed them as imagination. In my 7th year, I noticed that one of the wards on the vault had changed. The symbol was the same, but its orientation had shifted by perhaps 5 degrees. I checked my memory, certain I was mistaken. But no, I had studied those wards obsessively in my early years, memorized every curve and angle. This one had moved. I reported it during the next supply delivery, speaking through the sealed door to the handlers beyond. They acknowledged my report. 3 days later, I received a data slate message. Observation noted. Continue vigil. The Emperor protects. That was all. No explanation, no inspection team, no acknowledgement that something impossible had occurred. The ward returned to its original position the next day. In my 12th year, I woke from sleep and found frost covering the vault. This was impossible. The temperature control was absolute, never varying from 12 degrees. Yet there it was, a thin crystalline layer covering the black surface, beautiful and terrible in the pale yellow light. I approached slowly, bolt pistol drawn, every muscle tensed for combat. The frost was real. I could see my breath, though I should not have been able to. The air had gone from sterile cold to the razor edge of freezing. I stood there for 3 hours, waiting, watching, praying, until gradually the temperature normalized and the frost sublimated away without leaving moisture. I did not report this. I told myself it was a malfunction in my augmetic lenses, a hallucination born of isolation. The neural governor suppressed my fear, but it could not suppress the knowledge that I was lying to myself. In my 19th year, the vault hummed. Not the mechanical hum of the facility systems, which I had learned to tune out like breathing. This was different, a resonance that I felt more than heard, a vibration that seemed to pass through the adamantium floor and up through my bones. It lasted for 17 seconds. I counted each one. Bolt pistol aimed at the vault, finger on the trigger, prayer on my lips. When it stopped, the silence afterward was so complete I thought I had gone deaf. For the next week, I obsessively checked my hearing, speaking prayers aloud, striking the walls to produce sound, anything to confirm I had not lost another sense to this place. The humming returned exactly 1 year later. Then again, and again, always on the same day by my chronometer. An anniversary of something, a reminder of something, a warning of something. I began to dread that day, would spend weeks beforehand in heightened anxiety that the neural governor could barely suppress. What was inside the vault? What was trying to communicate? Or was it not communication at all, but simply the natural function of whatever horror slumbered there, breathing in its sealed tomb? I should have reported all of this. That was protocol. But protocol assumed a Shadowkeeper who remained detached, clinical, uncorrupted by curiosity. I had failed that standard years ago. I could not report these incidents without revealing my own compromised state, and if I revealed that, they would replace me. They would perform the final surgery, the one they reserved for Shadowkeepers who could no longer maintain psychological integrity, complete neural wipe, personality death, reduction to servitor. The body would remain, mindless and obedient, but the man would be gone. I chose silence. I chose to remain. I told myself it was duty, but underneath the neural governor's suppression, I knew the truth. I was afraid, not of what was in the vault, but of ceasing to be. Even this half-life, this cold isolation, this grinding routine, it was still existence. Better this than oblivion. I was wrong, of course. There are worse things than oblivion. I learned that in my 28th year. That was when the vault spoke to me. Not in words. I do not think human language could contain what it communicated. It was more like a pressure against my mind, an awareness that something on the other side of those seals knew I was there, knew I was listening, knew I was alone. The contact lasted only a moment, but in that moment I understood more than I wanted to. The thing inside was aware. It was patient. It had been waiting far longer than I had been alive, perhaps longer than the Imperium had stood. and it knew exactly how much time remained until I broke. The next day, I found the first mark on my body. It appeared during my morning ablutions, when I was washing with the rationed water. A symbol on my left shoulder blade, precisely where I could not see it without effort, but would feel its presence constantly. I discovered it only because I caught my reflection in the polished metal of the weapons locker. The symbol was the same as one of the wards on the vault. It had not been cut or tattooed into my flesh. It was simply there, as if it had always been there, as if my skin had decided to express this blasphemy of its own accord. I should have screamed. I should have carved it out with my combat knife. I should have reported it immediately. Instead, I stood frozen, staring at the impossible mark, while the neural governor tried and failed to suppress the horror that was too vast for its dampening protocols, because I understood what this meant. The vault had marked me. Whatever was inside had reached out, past adamantium and prayer seals, past wards laid down by tech priests and blessed by the ecclesiarchy, and it had touched me. I was no longer the guardian. I was no longer separate. I had become part of what I watched. Over the following weeks, more marks appeared. On my ribs, the back of my neck, my thighs, each one a perfect reproduction of a ward from the vault, growing on my skin like cancer, like mutation, like the first signs of corruption. I studied them obsessively, comparing them to the vault's surface, and every one was exact. I would wake from shallow sleep to find a new mark had bloomed while I rested. The neural governor kept me calm, kept me functional, but it could not erase the knowledge that I was changing, that the boundary between keeper and kept was dissolving. I continued my routine. What else could I do? I exercised. I prayed. I stood watch. I ate my tasteless meals. I read my approved texts, searching for some precedent, some guidance, some acknowledgement that this could happen. I found nothing. The books spoke of duty and sacrifice and unwavering faith, but they said nothing about what to do when your flesh betrays you, when your body becomes a canvas for the thing you are meant to contain. The supply servitors came on schedule. I said nothing. I wore my robes and ensured the marks were covered. The handlers left the supplies and sealed me in again. 17 minutes later, I was alone again with the vault and the growing constellation of symbols that decorated my skin like accusations. In my 31st year, I began to understand them. It started with dreams, or what I thought were dreams, though the neural governor should have suppressed such things. I would lie in my alcove during the mandated sleep period, and information would flow into my mind. Not words, not images, but pure understanding. The symbols were not wards, they were not protections. They were a language, and my body had become a text. Each mark contained information, compressed meaning that unfolded in my consciousness, like origami in reverse. I learned things I should not know, things about the vault's contents, things about why I was here, things about what the Imperium had locked away and why they needed a human guardian rather than automated systems. The vault contained a question. Not an artifact or a weapon or a Xenos abomination, though it was all of those things too. At its core, the vault contained a question so dangerous that to contemplate it was to risk damnation, and the question needed a conscious mind nearby, a witness, a potential answer. That was why they posted Shadowkeepers. That was why it had to be a human, alone, isolated, slowly ground down over decades. We were not guards. We were bait. We were test subjects. We were experiments in how long faith could withstand the pressure of an ontological paradox sealed in adamantium. I understood this, and the understanding changed nothing. I still could not open the vault. I still could not leave. I still could not report what was happening without inviting my own erasure. The trap was perfect, because it was voluntary. I could end it at any time by admitting failure. But to admit failure was to admit I had become compromised, which meant I would be destroyed, which meant the next Shadowkeeper would take my place, and the cycle would begin again. The Imperium's cruelty was infinite because it was systematic. There was no malice in it, no conscious evil, just the grinding machinery of necessity doing what it was designed to do. I hated them for this. I hated myself for understanding and choosing to remain. But most of all, I hated that I could not feel the full weight of that hatred because the neural governor kept dampening it, smoothing it, reducing it to background noise so I could continue functioning. The marks covered most of my body by my 35th year. I had become a living grimoire, a text written in the language of the thing I guarded. When I stood before the vault during my 6-hour watches, I felt a resonance, as if my skin was harmonizing with the seals before me. We were the same now. The boundary had dissolved completely. I was both guard and guarded, keeper and kept, the question and the attempt at an answer. This was when I noticed the second change. The vault was opening. Not physically, the seals remained intact, the adamantium unpierced, but something was leaking through. The chamber's atmosphere had begun to taste different, though I could not identify the flavor. It was subtle, like trying to describe the difference between water from two different sources. But it was there, and it was spreading. I would wake with the taste of it on my tongue. I would breathe it in during prayers. It permeated everything. This seepage from the vault, this atmospheric contamination that no filter could catch, because it was not material. It was conceptual. It was the question itself, diffusing through reality like ink through water. I began to ask myself things I had never questioned before. Why did the Imperium need to exist? Why was suffering necessary? Why was faith required? Why could I not simply open the vault and see? These were not my thoughts, or rather, they were my thoughts, but they originated from outside, suggestions planted by proximity to the question. The neural governor tried to suppress them, but it was designed to manage emotions, not philosophical corruption. I could feel it failing, could feel the margins of my own mind expanding and distorting under the pressure. In my 39th year, I stopped performing some of my prayers, not consciously, not as an act of rebellion. I simply found myself skipping sections, forgetting words, rushing through litanies that should have taken hours. The prayer became rote, mechanical, meaningless syllables recited by habit rather than faith, and I did not care. The neural governor did not flag this as a problem because it was not an emotion, it was the absence of emotion, a void where devotion had been. I was hollowing out from the inside, and the machinery implanted in my brain could not recognize the difference between suppressed feeling and no feeling at all. I still stood my watches. I still maintained my weapons. I still ate and slept and exercised, but these were automatic now, the motions of a body without a pilot. The man I had been, the earnest 17-year-old who had wept at his failure to join the Officio Assassinorum, who had believed he would serve the Emperor with honor, had died years ago. What remained was something else. Something that wore his flesh and performed his duties and waited for the inevitable conclusion. The vault hummed on schedule. I no longer raised my bolt pistol. There was no point. If the seals failed, if the thing inside emerged, I would not resist. How could I? We were the same now. The marks on my skin proved it. The question in my mind proved it. The gradual dissolution of everything I had been proved it. I was not the guardian anymore. I was the transition, the bridge, the moment before the seal broke, and whatever was inside stepped out into the world. I think the Imperium knew this would happen. I think every Shadowkeeper ends this way, slowly consumed by proximity to what they guard, transformed from protector to prophet, and I think they accept this as necessary, as just another cost of maintaining the Imperium's secrets. Better that one man be destroyed than the question be left unguarded. Better that I dissolve than the alternative. But what is the alternative? That is what I cannot answer. Even now, even with the marks covering me like armor, even with the taste of the question on every breath, I do not know what happens if the vault opens. I do not know what the question truly asks. I do not know if there is an answer, or if the seeking itself is the danger. The thing I guard has made me part of itself, has written itself onto my flesh and into my mind, but it has not given me knowledge, only awareness. only the certainty that there is something to know, and that knowing it would change everything. In my 42nd year, I began to forget my name, not all at once. First it became difficult to recall, requiring effort to summon from memory. Then it became uncertain. Was it Marcus, Malchus, Matthias? The neural scrubs they had performed in my early years had taken much, but they had left my name. I was sure of it. I had recited it in prayers, had whispered it to myself in the dark hours, had held on to it as proof that I still existed as a person. Now it was slipping away like water through fingers. I checked my permitted possessions, searching for some record, some confirmation of who I was. The data slate contained only doctrine. The books contained only prayers. My robes bore no name tag, no identification. I tried to remember the last time someone had addressed me by name. The handlers never spoke to me. The recruitment officer had used it once, I thought, when he first explained my assignment. But that was over 4 decades ago, and the memory had been degraded by time and surgery and isolation. It should have terrified me. Instead, I felt relief. A name implies identity, and identity implies boundaries, and boundaries were what I no longer possessed. The marks had covered me completely now, every inch of skin decorated with the vault's language. I was more symbol than man, more text than flesh. Losing my name was just the final confirmation of what I had already become. I stood before the vault during my watches, and I could feel it breathing. Not air, not exhalation, but something else, a rhythm and pulse, an in and out that matched my own respirations. We were synchronized. We were unified. Guard and guarded, keeper and kept, question and answer, all collapsed into a single point of awareness that existed in this cold chamber beneath the earth, waiting for something I could not name. The chronometer marked days I no longer understood. The supply servitors came and went. The routine continued, because routines do not require consciousness to maintain. I moved through the forms of my duty like a servitor, like the thing I would have become if I had reported my compromised state years ago. The difference was that I was still aware. I still knew what I had been. I could still remember the sensation of being human, even if I could no longer achieve it. That awareness was the cruelest part. To become a servitor would have been mercy the conscious mind erased, all capacity for suffering removed. But whatever process was transforming me had kept my awareness intact. I was condemned to witness my own dissolution, to feel each piece of identity falling away while remaining lucid enough to understand the loss. The Imperium had not saved me from madness through their neural governor. They had preserved me in a state of perfect sanity, while everything that made me human was systematically destroyed. In my 43rd year this month, this week, the final change began. I was standing my watch when I felt the vault shift. Not physically. The adamantium remained solid, the seals unbroken. But something had changed in the relationship between inside and outside. The barrier had thinned. The question was closer now, pressing against the final membrane of separation. I could hear it clearly for the first time, not as sound but as meaning transmitted directly into my consciousness. The question was this: what justifies existence? Not human existence. Not the Imperium's existence. Existence itself, the fundamental state of being rather than non-being. The fact that there is something rather than nothing. The question was asking why reality persists, what purpose it serves, what meaning can be derived from the brute fact of the universe continuing to be. And it was not a philosophical exercise. It was a weapon, because to truly consider, the question was to recognize that there might be no answer, that existence might be arbitrary, meaningless, a cosmic accident sustained only by momentum and nothing more. This was what the vault contained. This was what I had guarded for 43 years. Not a thing, but an idea, and ideas are more dangerous than any weapon, because they cannot be destroyed, only forgotten. The Imperium had sealed it away, because there was no defense against it, no argument that could refute it, no faith strong enough to dismiss it. The only solution was isolation, containment, the posting of human guards who would slowly be consumed by proximity to the question so that it would never spread beyond these walls. I understood now why they chose humans rather than automated systems. Machines would not be affected. Machines do not question their own existence, but humans do, and in doing so, they could absorb the question, could take it into themselves, and neutralize it through their own destruction. Each Shadowkeeper was a sacrifice, a living buffer designed to catch and contain the mimetic hazard so it could not infect the wider Imperium. I was not a guard. I was an antibody. I was an ablative shield, meant to be burned away, and I had failed. Because I still exist, which means the question has not yet consumed me completely, but I can feel the final dissolution approaching. The marks on my skin have begun to move, the symbols crawling across my flesh like living things. When I look at my hands, I see text rearranging itself, new meanings forming and reforming, the language of the vault rewriting me in real time. My body is no longer mine. It belongs to the question now, has been claimed as territory in a war between meaning and meaninglessness. I no longer eat. The nutrient paste sits untouched. I do not hunger. My body has found some other sustenance, some other way to persist that does not require material input. I think I am being sustained by the question itself, fed by the same force that maintains the vault. We have become a closed system, a perfect loop of guard and guarded that needs nothing from outside. I no longer sleep. The alcove sits empty during the rest periods. I stand before the vault continuously now, bolt pistol hanging loose in my grip, my vigil unbroken because I am no longer human enough to require rest. The chronometer still marks time, but time has lost meaning. Each second is identical to the last. Each hour contains the same eternal moment of standing, breathing, existing in the presence of the question. The handlers will come soon for the scheduled supply delivery. They will speak through the sealed door and receive no response. They will follow protocol, wait the prescribed period, then force entry if necessary. They will find me standing here, alive but unreachable, transformed into something between human and symbol, and they will do what they always do: seal the chamber, report to their superiors, and begin the selection process for the next Shadowkeeper. Unless I open the vault first, the thought comes to me now with increasing frequency, no longer an intrusion but a natural conclusion. Why maintain the seal? I am already consumed. I am already lost. The question has already written itself into my flesh and mind. Opening the vault would simply make visible what has already occurred internally. It would be an act of honesty, of completion, of allowing the outside to match the inside. I could do it. The protocols are in my memory, preserved despite all the neural scrubs. 3 keys, 2 biometric scans, 17 minutes of prayer. I possess all of these. My authorization has never been revoked. In the Imperium's bureaucratic logic, I am still the legitimate guardian, still empowered to access what I guard. Opening the vault would not be a violation of duty. It would be an execution of authority. But I do not move. Something holds me here, some final fragment of the man I was. Not faith that burned away years ago. Not duty that is merely habit now. Not fear the neural governor ensures. I cannot feel it strongly enough to motivate action. What remains is something smaller, more fundamental. Inertia. The simple fact that I have stood here for 43 years, and standing is what I do, and change requires more energy than continuation. So I remain. I stand. I breathe the question in and out. I feel the marks on my skin rearranging themselves, trying different configurations, searching for the answer that might exist in the specific sequence of symbols. I am both text and reader, both question and attempted response. I am the Shadowkeeper, though I can no longer remember what that name means or who gave it to me. The vault hums. It is not the anniversary, not the scheduled time, but it hums anyway. The sound is different now, not a vibration but a resonance, a harmony between its frequency and mine. We are singing to each other, the guard and the guarded, the keeper and the kept. The song has no words, no melody, only the pure expression of existence questioning itself. I think the seal is about to break. Not because it has weakened, but because I have. The barrier was never in the adamantium or the wards. It was in me, in the consciousness that maintained the separation between inside and outside. And that consciousness is dissolving, has been dissolving for decades, is now so thin that light passes through it without obstruction. When I cease, the vault will open. Not mechanically, the seals will remain intact, but the containment will fail because there will be no witness, no awareness to maintain the fiction of separation. The question will simply be, unguarded and unmarked, free to diffuse into the Imperium like poison gas, or perhaps that is already happening. Perhaps every Shadowkeeper who stands vigil is a vector, a carrier who broadcasts the question simply by existing in its presence. Perhaps the Imperium knows this and considers it acceptable, another calculated cost of survival. Better that the question spread slowly, leaked by corrupted guardians, than be released all at once in an uncontrolled breach. I do not know. The question has given me awareness but not knowledge. I understand the mechanism of my own destruction, but not its purpose. I can describe what is happening to me with perfect clarity, but I cannot say why it must happen this way, why the Imperium chose this method rather than simple destruction, why anything exists rather than nothing. The chronometer continues its count. The fluorescent panels bathe everything in pale yellow light. The temperature remains 12 degrees exactly. The air tastes of the question. My skin crawls with symbols. The vault hums its tuneless song. And I stand, because standing is what remains when everything else has been taken away. I think I hear footsteps above. The supply servitors, arriving on schedule. They will descend the long shaft, guided by handlers, carrying their burden of nutrient paste and water filters and ammunition I will never use. They will seal me in and depart. They will report that the Shadowkeeper remains at his post. And the machinery of the Imperium will continue, grinding forward, indifferent to the slow catastrophe unfolding in this buried chamber. I should warn them. I should report that the containment is failing, that I am compromised, that the question is leaking. But to do so would require speech, and I have not spoken aloud in years. My voice has atrophied. My throat has forgotten how to form words. The marks cover my lips now, symbols written even on the inside of my mouth, and I think if I tried to speak, I would only produce the question itself, would become a vector of transmission rather than an alarm. So I remain silent. I stand. I watch the vault. I feel the symbols rearranging on my skin, and I wait for the moment when the final boundary dissolves, and I learn whether there is anything on the other side of the question, or whether the question is all there is, eternal and unanswerable, the only true constant in a universe that should not exist but does. The footsteps are closer now. I can feel the vibration through the floor, through the adamantium, through the marks on my skin. The supply servitors are descending. In 17 minutes, they will arrive at the vault door. They will speak the prayer of opening. They will deposit their supplies. They will seal me in again. And nothing will change, because nothing can change, because change requires agency, and I have none, because I am not the guardian anymore but the thing guarded, not the keeper but the kept. I am the Shadowkeeper. I do not remember what that means. The vault hums, and I hum with it, and the question spreads through the frequencies of our shared song, and somewhere far above, in the world I left behind 43 years ago, the sun is rising or setting or doing neither, because the sun does not exist for those of us who dwell in the deep places, who guard the questions that cannot be answered, who become the very things we were meant to contain. I am the Shadowkeeper. I am the vault. I am the question. And I am still standing, because standing is all I know, all I am, all I will ever be, until the moment I am not, and then the seal will break, and the question will emerge, and the Imperium will send another 17-year-old who failed the Officio Assassinorum's requirements, and the cycle will begin again, and again, and again, forever and always, in the name of the Emperor who sits on his golden throne, and does not care, has never cared, cannot care, because caring requires consciousness, and consciousness requires boundaries, and boundaries are what the question dissolves. I hear the vault door beginning to open above. The prayer of opening, 17 minutes long, spoken in voices that shake with the effort of maintaining faith in this place, where faith comes to die. I do not turn to look. I cannot turn to look. I stand before the vault, bolt pistol in hand, marks covering every inch of my skin, question resonating in every cell of my body. I am the Shadowkeeper. This is my duty. This is my fate. This is all I am, and all I will ever be, until the answer comes or the question consumes everything. The Emperor protects, they say, but he does not protect me. No one does. No one can. And in the end, that is the only answer the question requires. We are alone, have always been alone, will always be alone, and the Imperium's vast machinery exists only to prevent us from realizing this simple truth. I am still standing. I will always be standing, and that is the most brutal thing of all.